Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're wading into some pretty complex international news and analysis.
Yeah, we're focusing mainly on recent statements and actions, particularly involving the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine.
And also touching on some maybe surprising takes on global economics and even history.
Exactly. We've got a bunch of sources. A key one is a YouTube transcript offering commentary, plus news snippets, official statements, that kind of thing.
Our goal here is really to sift through all that, pull out the key insights, maybe find some hidden meanings, and just, help make sense of it all for you.
Right, to see the bigger picture without getting lost in the noise. We want to connect the dots and maybe spark a few aha moments along the way.
Okay, let's get into it. Logical place to start seems to be Donald Trump. He's certainly been making headlines.
Yes, and what's interesting right off the bat is this sort of contrast. On one side, you have him saying he's running America, running the world, feeling very happy.
Big claims.
Very big. And then there's this White House video about his great achievements in the first 100 days. The source we looked at felt it seemed a bit rushed, maybe? Like
Yeah.
tried to quickly craft a narrative.
Right. And maybe that need to push the achievements ties into his approval ratings, which aren't looking, well, stellar on foreign policy or the economy.
No. And even immigration is apparently sitting at 50-50. So while he dismisses online polls as fake,
Which he often does.
yeah,
Yeah.
the overall trend probably isn't quite as rosy as he presents it.
It seems like part of a pattern, maybe. Downplaying the bad news, really hyping the perceived wins for his base.
Absolutely. And that ties into his announcement about victory in Europe, day May 8th, not May 9th, he specified, and victory over Japan Day.
Okay.
And the claim that the U.S. did more than all other countries in World War II, won both wars with, like, unmatched strength and genius, blaming past leaders for not celebrating enough.
That's quite a statement. Our source sees this as a definite play to stir up nationalist feelings, right?
Yeah.
Energize that populist base.
Exactly. Connecting to that feeling of being overlooked, strong nationalist messages. It fits with those executive orders, too. The ones about taxpayer money, fulfilling promises. It's that America First theme again.
But the history part, claiming the U.S. did more than everyone in WWII, that seems like...
A significant rewrite, yeah.
Yeah.
Our source points out it largely ignores the massive Soviet effort against Nazi Germany and, the timing of the atomic bombs ending the war with Japan in August-September.
It's not just a minor detail, is it? Claiming the U.S. did more than all other countries.
No, it's a fundamental reshaping of the historical narrative. And while it might resonate with some, it risks, well, upsetting allies and just misrepresenting complex events.
Yeah.
Could backfire diplomatically down the line.
And it wasn't just WWII, was it? There was that comment about Pakistan and India fighting for 1,000 years.
Right. Another factual inaccuracy. The source we reviewed expressed some disappointment there. I hope that he'd focus more on tackling, quote, the underworld in the U.S. and Europe rather than these kinds of statements.
It paints a picture of someone maybe relying more on positive reinforcement and less concern with historical details.
It's definitely a complex image. You have this strong populist rhetoric, but then actions like authorizing the first $50 million in defense aid for Ukraine.
Which seems almost contradictory to claiming no mistakes in 100 days, especially with foreign policy challenges.
Precisely. Which brings us to the U.S. involvement in the region. This U.S.-Ukraine rare earth deal, for instance. It's being framed as this major breakthrough for peace.
Sounds good on paper, but the details.
Well, that's where it gets tricky. There were these conflicting reports, weren't there? First, talk of Washington facilitating a possible 30-day ceasefire between Moscow and Kyiv. No border talks, no Zaporizhzhia discussion, potential extension?
Sounded like progress, maybe.
Potentially. But then, almost immediately, the State Department says, actually, we're pulling back from mediating directly. They said they wouldn't, quote, go from one end of the earth to the other, but would support negotiations.
Which our source interpreted as basically just keep selling weapons.
That was a skeptical take, yeah. A rather abrupt U-turn in approach. It raises questions about the strategy, doesn't it?
Oh.
Especially concerning that rare earth deal.
Yeah. And this happens while Trump is saying he likes Xi Jinping, confident about a trade deal, but also claiming Chinese factories are closing because the U.S. isn't buying their stuff.
Right. Which directly contradicts China's foreign ministry saying they're not interested in negotiating right now and are waiting for the U.S. The messaging is, well, all over the place.
And the White House assuring Ukraine of this independent, sovereign future, almost like it's purely a U.S. project. It feels a bit detached.
It does.
So back to that rare earth deal. Historic, they say. But what are the nuts and bolts? Rare earths are vital, obviously, for tech defense.
Huge geopolitical factor. But the deal specifics, they raise serious doubts. It's a 10-year deal, right?
Yeah.
And the resources are mostly in territory Russia currently controls. Plus, any changes need mutual agreement. Our source basically calls it MUCA, like window dressing.
Yeah.
More symbolic than substantial.
So Trump gets to present it as a win to his base, reclaiming something lost, a populist move. But practically, it's maybe not much.
That's the interpretation.
Yeah.
And it feeds into that concern our source raised, prioritizing populist appeal over perhaps solid national interest or long-term strategy.
Okay. And the Treasury Department explicitly linked this deal to countering China and Russia, right? Supporting Ukraine, preventing Russian war funding.
Yeah, framing it in that bigger geopolitical context.
It's just such a tangled situation. That reported U-turn during the Pope's funeral visit, described as clumsy. It all adds to this sense of policy whiplash.
And the contradictory messages from within the administration are striking, too. That security advisor getting promoted after being dismissed. The VP's different take.
Yeah.
Marco Rubio highlighting the first weapons shipment while Trump talks peace.
It's dizzying.
It really is.
Then you have the ABC interview. Trump claiming Putin wanted all of Ukraine but stopped because of him, saying he doesn't trust Putin, but Putin respects him.
Our source had a pretty blunt take on that.
Which was?
Basically that Putin is likely playing Trump. And the idea that Putin's actions hinge on respect for Trump is, well, probably an oversimplification.
Seems likely. And the Atlantic interview. Claiming javelins saved Kaj, the war would have ended in a day without them, while also talking about the pain of daily casualties.
The source points out the timeline just doesn't add up. The impact of javelins versus the overall course of the war. It's presented inaccurately there.
It highlights that danger, doesn't it? Relying on these big, bold statements that might not hold up to scrutiny.
Definitely. And that reported plea from the dismissed national security advisor urging a deal before Trump loses patience, fearing hospitalization, it's just another bizarre layer.
And through it all, Trump insists, no mistakes in 100 days, despite the low approval ratings across the board.
Yeah. The observation from our source is that after 100 days, the U.S. seems to have just added spice, maybe?
Yeah.
No clear strategy, no backup plans, resorting to small tricks and pressure.
And meanwhile, the confirmation that U.S. defense firms will keep selling weapons to Ukraine directly or via Europe.
Right. That underscores the ongoing conflict and the economic interests tied up in it, which contrasts sharply with those proposed budget cuts reported by the Wall Street Journal.
Ah, yes, the $163 billion cut from environment, energy, education, foreign aid areas without those big financial lobbies, as the source noted.
Implying defense spending is likely going up.
And the source worried about the fallout from those cuts, especially foreign aid and the U.S. image abroad.
It's a significant shift in priorities, potentially.
Okay, let's pivot to Russia's reaction to all this. What's their stance been?
Pretty consistent, actually. They want the conflict resolved, but very much on their terms. They're not letting Trump dictate things. The foreign ministry explicitly rejecting Ukraine's 1991 borders sends a clear signal.
And that media post-analysis, it suggested Trump's conditions might be the best Russia could hope for right now, given the battlefield, but still not their ultimate goals.
Exactly. Those maximalist goals, transferring the 4 regions, shrinking Ukraine's army, removing Zelensky, changing domestic policy media posts, thinks those aren't achievable diplomatically anyway.
And the assessment was that Ukraine's ready to keep fighting, even without U.S. aid, unless things drastically change on the ground.
Right. They're unlikely to accept really harsh terms easily, which challenges the idea that Trump's plan is automatically good for Ukraine.
The analysis even suggested a ceasefire under Trump's plan could be a win for Russia.
That was the argument. Solidify control of 20% of Ukraine, get Crimea recognized, maybe see sanctions lifted. It could strengthen Russia geopolitically, block Ukraine from NATO.
And the proposed trade-off, Zaporizhia and the Kakhovka Dam, seemed minor in comparison.
Pretty minor, yes.
Yeah.
Though our source was skeptical of this whole analysis, pointing back to Russia's stated goals from the start, it's hard to know for sure.
So what are Russian officials actually saying, Peskov, Lavrov?
Peskov reiterated Putin's openness to talks, no preconditions, but stressed it has to involve Ukraine directly, reflect ground realities, and achieve all of Russia's goals for a peaceful settlement. They acknowledge U.S. efforts, but call it complex.
And Lavrov at the BRICS meeting.
Similar themes. Putin proposed talks, no ceasefire prospects seen, blamed Kyiv for aggression, preferred dialogue with Washington, called U.S.-Russia relations normal. You know, standard lines. Plus, denouncing stupid statements from the EU and London.
Any other Russian voices?
A Development Council official mentioned Ukraine's disrespect for peace initiatives would be factored into future talks. Suggests maybe a hardening stance.
But their UN rep, Polyansky, sounded slightly more hopeful. Negotiations could happen soon if Kyiv takes
A
steps.
little bit, yeah. But then you contrast that with Zelensky threatening attacks on Moscow's Victory Day parade.
Right. Demanding an immediate, unconditional ceasefire first.
Mhm.
Not exactly meeting in the middle.
Not at all. And then Andriy Yermak, head of Zelensky's office, threw in that historical claim.
Ah, the one about the Soviets needing U.S. and Ukrainian help to win WWII, highlighting the Ukrainian army's role, U.S. resources.
Yeah, claiming 60% of Soviet divisions had Ukrainian involvement. Another significant historical reinterpretation, this time from the Ukrainian side.
Okay, shifting gears slightly to the economic and military claims. Zelensky said Russian defense industries are dying because of sanctions. Factories closing.
Yes, he did. And interestingly, it kind of echoed Trump's comment about Chinese factories closing.
But the expert analysis says something different.
Quite different, actually. It suggests that while both sides' defense industries are strained, Ukrainian sanctions might have actually spurred growth in Russia's defense sector, double-digit growth.
Really?
That's what some reports indicate. And Western experts seem to agree Russia's economy is stabilizing, projected to grow in 2025, with defense playing a key role. Around 400 factories involved in expansion.
And Putin himself boasted about production increases recently.
In April 2025, yeah. Double production of weapons, EW gear, got thousands of new armored vehicles, hundreds of aircraft, 1.5 million UAVs, said they weren't stopping. So a very different picture from Zelensky's claim.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, key takeaways. It's been a lot.
It has. I mean, we've seen these pronouncements and policies, lots of potential contradictions, maybe hidden agendas. Trump's America First generates bold claims, but also pushback.
The Ukraine situation is clearly still incredibly fluid, contested narratives everywhere.
Absolutely. Russia seems pretty set on its objectives. And the economic realities, historical takes, they offer a counterpoint to some of the louder claims being made.
It definitely paints a complex picture, which leads us to our final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah, considering these really starkly different stories we hear about WWII history, about the current war in Ukraine, how do we make sure we're getting the full picture?
How do we see beyond the nationalist spin, the headlines? What's our responsibility, to really question the information we get and seek out different views?
This is a crucial question, I think. Something worth mulling over.
Definitely something to think about. Until our next deep dive.